Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I think in my previous video, one of my previous videos, I spoke about diminished scale and how to get the diminished chord from the scale. And I mentioned that every chord comes from a scale. So if you want to play a major chord, it means you have to first get your major scale or major triad and then generate your chord from the scale. Now we looked at the diminished chords for all the keys, and we had this to be our C diminished chord, this to be our C sharp diminished chord, this to be our D diminished chord, this to be our E flat diminished chord, our E diminished chord, our F diminished chord, our F sharp diminished chord, our G diminished chord, our A flat diminished chord, our A diminished chord, our B flat diminished chord, and our B diminished chord. We looked at these chords from key C to key B, the various keys and their diminished chords. Today, I want to focus on diminished seventh chords. Diminished seventh chords. Diminished seventh chords. So, in the previous video, when I was talking about the diminished chords, I illustrated the diminished scale in key C and then showed how we could get our diminished chord from the scale. In this video, I will illustrate the diminished scale once again and then show how we can get our diminished seventh chord still from the same scale. Before I continue the video, kindly do well to click the subscribe button, like, and then share the video for others to also enjoy the content. So, back to key C. With our diminished scale, we have our C diminished scale to be so with the diminished seventh chords. Since I've already spoken about how to get the diminished chords in my previous video, I will not go over it. You can kindly click on that video and then watch it. So I'll continue from having our diminished chords in all the keys. I'll just press the diminished chords I've already spoken about. Then we add the seventh to it to make the diminished seventh chord. So with key C, we had this to be our C diminished chord, C diminished chord. So to get our seventh or our C diminished seventh chord, from our last note of the C diminished chord, which is our Fi, we have Do, Mo, Fi, Do, Mo, Fi, or 1 flat 3 flat 5. So from the flat 5, you move a minor third interval to your right, and then the note you settle on, when you add it to your diminished chord, then you get your diminished seventh chord. So from this note, our minor third will be 3 semitones from this note, which is 1, 2, 3. So we have this to be our key C diminished seventh. Our key C diminished seventh. For easy understanding too, even to form the diminished chords, I can just recap this. Even to form the diminished chord, after pressing the key you want to find the diminished in, you just find the minor third interval, the minor third interval, the minor third interval. The first two minor third intervals will give you the diminished chord of that key, and then the third minor third interval will give you the seventh, making it the diminished seventh of that key. So in key C, our third minor or our minor third interval will be 1, 2, 3. Another minor third interval 1, 2, 3. Then we have this to be our C diminished chord, and then our next minor third interval 1, 2, 3. Then we get our C diminished seventh chord, C diminished seventh chord. For key C sharp and the rest, I'll first press the diminished, and then we just continue with the seventh for the sake of lengthy videos, not making the video very long. So with key C sharp, we had this to be our diminished chord, C sharp diminished chord. To get our diminished seventh, our C sharp diminished seventh, from our last note, we'll move a minor third interval, which is 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3. And we have this to be our C sharp diminished seventh chord, C sharp diminished seventh chord. In key D, we had this to be our D diminished chord. We had this to be our D diminished chord. So if we want the diminished seventh, we also count a minor third interval from this last note here, from this last note, the last note of the D diminished, which is 1, 2, 3, and we have this to be our D diminished seventh chord, D diminished seventh chord. In E flat, we had our diminished to be this. For our diminished seventh, we count a minor third interval from our last notes in our diminished chord, 1, 2, 3. We have this to be our key E flat diminished seventh chord, key E flat diminished seventh chord, key E. This is our diminished chord for key E. So for our diminished seventh chord, we count a minor third interval as well, 1, 2, 3, and we have this to be our key E diminished seventh chord. Key F, we have this to be our key F diminished chord. For our key F diminished seventh chord, we'll count a minor third interval from our F, 1, 2, 3, and we have this to be our key F diminished seventh chord. So for the people who want to just use the notes to get the chord, this is a Do, a Mo, a Fi, and a La. So Do, Mo, Fi, La. So when we come to key F sharp, the same thing. This is our diminished chord. We only add our La to it, which is a minor third from our Fi here, making it Do, Mo, Fi, La, Do, Mo, Fi, La in key F sharp. We move to key G. This is our G major chord, and then this is our G diminished chord, key G diminished chord. We add our La, which is the minor third from our Fi, and then we have this to be our key G diminished seventh chord, key G diminished seventh chord. We had this for key A flat as our key A flat diminished chord. For our key A flat diminished seventh chord, we add our La, making it key A flat diminished seventh chord. Key A, this is our A major chord, add our A diminished chord. To have our seventh chord, we need a structure of Do, Mo, Fi, and La. So we have our Do, our Mo, our Fi, and this will be our La. Then we have this chord as our key A diminished seventh chord. We move to key B flat. We have this as our key B flat diminished chord. To get our diminished seventh chord, the same process. We count a minor third interval from our last note of our diminished. We have 1, 2, 3, and it joins the diminished chord to form a B flat diminished seventh chord. And for our last key B, we had this to be the diminished chord for key B. So for key B diminished seventh, we still count a minor third from the last note of the diminished chord. This is the last note of the diminished chord. So our minor third interval will be 1, 2, 3, and we will have this to be our key B diminished seventh chord, key B diminished seventh chord. So basically, to get the diminished chord or the diminished seventh chord, you first of all press the key you want to find the diminished in. and then you find a minor third interval from that note or from the key you are pressing, and then another minor third interval. So the first two minor third intervals you hit will be your diminished chord, and then when you add the third minor third interval, you are going to have the diminished seventh of that key. So in summary, we had this chord to be our C diminished seventh, our C sharp diminished seventh, our D diminished seventh, our E flat diminished seventh, our key E diminished seventh, our key F diminished seventh, key F sharp diminished seventh, key G diminished seventh, key A flat diminished seventh, key A diminished seventh, key B flat diminished seventh, and then key B diminished seventh. For those of us who like playing the local strings or wish to learn how to play the local strings, for you to be able to play the strings well, you should understand how the diminished works. Because if you don't understand how the diminished works, you will be learning the chords as you've been taught. For instance, someone teaches you play this here, play this here, play this here. You become very rigid in terms of expression. You will not be able to express yourself very well. But if you understand how the diminished works, playing of the strings will be quite easy if you sit down and then you just try to relate one key to the other key, one chord to the other chord, especially with the diminished. So I think that will be all for this video. We just spoke about how to get our diminished seventh chords in all the keys. Thank you for watching this video.